last year and so far this year, we've really enjoyed this idea of the theme of my life in 5 objects and 2 songs related to, to faith and to coming to faith and so on. And I think it's been really helpful to us all, and certainly entertaining as well, there's nothing wrong with that. So this evening, we've got Mr. Nick Tyldesley with us. Nick is regularly with us as a member of the group, but he did say that when I was asking for people to volunteer to take on this theme and speak to us, he was willing to do so. So he's well known to us all one way or another, isn't he? A member of the congregation of the St. Cuthbert's parishes, and of course various members of our congregation know him through U3A and various other connected organisations. So I want to say a big thank you and a big welcome to you, Nick, to our evening. You're always welcome when you do come, but as our speaker. So I'm going to hand over to you now. Mr. Nick Tyldesley.
Thanks for that, Brian. Can I just do a sound check? Is that level of loudness okay? Do I need to speak louder? Is that better?
Yeah.
That's okay. Right, well, first of all, let me offer 2 apologies for being here. One is that I'm a theological amateur, and I don't have the label of being a reverend. So I'm a little bit nervous about being in this sort of context. But I can say that I did win a divinity prize at school, and in a previous existence I did write the Sacre Agreed Syllabus for RE for use in Bolton schools, so I've got a little bit of street cred here. Now, for those of us who are on the lecture circuit, there are 2 times in the day that are known as the graveyard slot in terms of audience lack of reaction. After lunch and after dinner, your audience is either drunk or asleep. I'm not sure what the situation is here, having had a meal, but I need to do something to redress that, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with our first song, not for the moment, although chronologically it doesn't quite fit in with my life narrative, but I do have my reasons. In the 1960s, the BBC Enterprises produced an audio tape and a film strip package for schools called In the Trenches. It was based on popular songs of World War I with archive photographs. It was an absolutely brilliant way of teaching the narrative of World War I, raising issues of historical interpretation, the reality and the morality of war, and you could use it with any sort of group, including adults. I knew that when the song Pack Up Your Troubles was played in the classroom, every single class, without me saying anything at all, the class would sing along with the music. And then I turned the film strip slide on, and the next slide showed a skeleton in a half-flooded trench, wearing a helmet and grinning at the camera. And at that point, the singing stopped. And at that point, I knew that the message of history, of what warfare is like, has resonated with the pupils. So, what I want us to do to start with is to listen to the opening chorus of the musical Oh What a Lovely War, which is a stage version of In the Trenches. So what I'd like you to do is to tap your feet, reveal your inner irony, reflect on the general issues of wars, past and present, and indeed sing along. So can we have song 1, please?
Oh, 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 it's a lovely war. Who wouldn't be a soldier, eh? Oh, it's a shame to take the pain. As soon as humanity is gone, we feel just as heavy as lead. But we never get up when the sergeant brings our breakfast up to bed. Oh, oh, it's a lovely war. Oh, what do we want with eggs in hand when we've got plum and apple jam? Warm, pause, right turn. How should we spend the money we earn? Oh, 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 it's a lovely war. Up to the waist in water, up to the eyes in
I didn't hear any singing. Come on. I hope you're not sleeping, but anyway. Right, well, let's start at the beginning. And can we have object 1, please? Object 1 is a set of pebbles from the beach at East Runton, which is a little fishing village just outside Cromer in Norfolk. In the 1920s, my dad and his family travelled all the way from Lancashire down to East Runton for holidays in a caravan. My grandmother did come from Norfolk. And for the last 50 years or so, I have been a very frequent visitor to both Cromer, North Norfolk, and indeed East Runton. And I too have had a caravan in East Runton. Not the same caravan, I might add, but it's a place for me where I can really relax, unwind, and I spend the time beach walks and sketching and painting out in the open air. So Norfolk is something special to me. But you will see as we go through the narrative that there will be lots of other Norfolk references. But my links with Norfolk go back further than 50 years. On both sides of my family, if you go back to the 1750s and even earlier, both sides of the family were Norfolk, well, for want of a better phrase, that awful word, peasants. They were agricultural workers, reed makers, basket weavers, gamekeepers, thatchers, dairymaids. They worked on the land. But as the agricultural reforms of the 18th century kicked in, giving the rich farmers an advantage over the poor, agricultural labourers found it difficult to get jobs at a time when machinery was coming in, and they migrated looking for work. And if you trace my family over the last 200 years or so, and you look at the census for every 50 years or so, the families, I say on both sides, have started to move from Norfolk, migrating westwards and northwards to Lincolnshire, to the East Midlands. And by the time we get to the turn of the 20th century, they've settled on both sides of the Pennines. And each time they move, and you can trace this with the records, gradually their occupations have risen up the social scale. So they've moved from manual labour to clerical jobs, shopkeepers, that sort of thing. So I do have Norfolk roots. But I was largely brought up in the West Midlands, outside Birmingham, a place called Solihull. And if you read your copy of the I newspaper last Saturday, they did a travel and tourism section, and Solihull was deemed a place to go for a spring break. Well, I spent more than a spring break there, but it is very nice. Now, when I was doing A-level history at school, the film Dr. Zhivago came out. And for me, Dr. Zhivago is the second best film ever produced. Number one is Casablanca. But Dr. Zhivago fired in me a real passionate enthusiasm for Russian history and the Russian Revolution. I wasn't so much keen on the romantic element between Omar Sharif and, what's her name? Judy Christie, thank you. But it was the history of it. And David Lean, as a filmmaker, is a brilliant, brilliant storyteller. So when I applied to university, I applied to the School of European Studies at the University of East Anglia in Norwich. There again, another Norfolk connection. And I focused my attention on political philosophy, French and Russian history, and literature. And indeed, I did a special study on the Russian Revolution. So could we have object number 2, please? Object number 2 is a Russian fur hat. I would like to say that no animal was harmed in the production of this hat, but I can't. It is a beaver hat, and it was bought in the GUM store in the center of Moscow, which in communist times was a store for foreigners to buy things and certain privileged members of the Communist Party. And I bought this Russian hat when I went on a visit just after finishing university. Russia at that time was, I say, under communism. It was still Cold War times. The food and the hotels left much to be desired. This is a working hat. I mean, I do wear it in Bolton when it's snowing, and it has been back to its roots along Siberia when the first snows of winter fell, and I didn't feel out of place with this fur hat. Now, as a historian, every historian has their own sort of philosophy of history. There's no standard one version that you take. And at the time of university, and for quite some time onwards, I would describe my approach to history as neo-Marxist. I believed in, and still do to some extent, in the iron laws of history determining human development. Not so sure I particularly wanted the unwashed poor to rule the world. Historians are much better at ruling the world, but certainly I did take an economic, deterministic approach to understanding the past. Now, when I finished university, I did want to continue using my history skills, and I took the path into history teaching. And as a historian, I'm so used to assessing effective leaders or ineffective leaders, rulers, good kings, bad kings, what works in government, what causes crises, that I've always had an interest in that concept of management and leadership and how you organize organizations. And I took an interest in management, educational management. For me, curriculum development and school management are symbiotic. They both affect each other. So I spent a lot of time, and continue to have done so throughout my career, on management issues. And in 1984, I was invited to contribute to a book called New Directions in Educational Leadership. So can we have number 3, please? Yeah. Now, this is written before Ofsted, before IT really hit schools, before academies. It sounds as if it ought to be out of date, but it actually isn't. There's some very good generic ideas covering the whole range of educational leadership, from local authorities, inspectors, head teachers, and whatever. And I contributed a section on departmental leadership, middle management. Tony Blair and I agree that if you want to change an organisation, don't look so much at the leaders, look at the next stage down, because these are the people who actually do the donkey work and implementing reforms, rather than making speeches saying what the reforms ought to be. And in fact, my opening sort of remarks in the sections that I wrote is a quote from Machiavelli saying that the quality of a prince is judged by the quality of the people around him. And that sort of puts the role of middle leaders in a nutshell. And my general thesis was to argue that the qualities needed by middle leaders, they've got to be fixers. And I'll just read a quote from it. Fixers display great skills in assembling resources such as people, power, and finance in order to release social deadlocks and to bring about change. They are often intuitive rather than rational or programmatic thinkers, and may have the necessary ability to bring together the bureaucratic skills of the system administrator and the visionary and social skills of the change manager to effect change. Fixers are much in demand at the moment, and that was written 40 years ago, and I would say it was still true today. And I've always been interested in writing about education and history. I think I probably have lost count of the number of articles and things that I have produced, but it is probably in the region of at least, 150, 200 or so. Now, at the same time as I was getting involved in issues around management, I started my career of travelling. For me, travel abroad is not just a holiday. It's not places to relax in the sunshine and drink pina coladas and whatever, although there is a place for that. For me, travelling helps me as a historian. It helps me empathise with cultures and situations where I can use my imagination to get under the skin and into the mind of people in the past. I think there are probably 3 examples of where empathy and travel have been strong for me. One is Machu Picchu in Peru, sitting in the middle of Machu Picchu, surrounded by 3 or 4 llamas and some guinea pigs, all on my own, and just feeling the atmosphere of being, for what the Incas saw as the center of their universe, surrounded by sacred mountains. There was a spirituality in that place that I certainly got the vibes for. The second place is the station platform at Auschwitz. Again, on my own and in the silence, because as Primo Levi says, the birds don't sing in Auschwitz. But in my mind and in my head, there was a lot of noise. The noise of the furnaces roaring away, the sound of the guard dogs forcing people into the 2 queues, one, for instance, gassing and the others for slave labour. The sounds of orders being shouted in German, the sound of a string orchestra playing Mozart to kid the prisoners that they were coming to a resettlement camp, the sound of the clanking trains braking and the hiss of steam. Very, very powerful place to be. And the third is the Forbidden City in China. So could we have the next object, please? I went to China in 1988, and here we have a Red Guard Mao cap from the Cultural Revolution. I didn't get it from a Red Guard. I got it from a stall on the Great Wall, which sold, and still continues to sell, lots of Maoist memorabilia. I wanted to go to China because I'd seen a film, the film The Last Emperor, that is based on the Forbidden City. And I can't tell you how that frisson of excitement as the plane landed at Beijing airport, and I was in a culture where the language was totally unknown to me, the culture, the noise, the crowds, the great number of people just milling around. And this was China before much westernization. Million bikes, the high-rise building programs in places like Shanghai were not there. Foreigners had a special currency, the foreign exchange certificates, to get more money out of them. You were watched all the time. But I have found China a really fascinating place to be. And my interests have started to move eastwards from Russia, through Central Asia, and through exploring Chinese culture and history. And in fact, this morning, a bit of bad planning on my part, but I did run a U3A class in Chinese poetry this morning, not in Chinese, and it was Uyghur poetry rather than Mandarin, but nevertheless, it was of Chinese, a Chinese focus. and I've picked up some Mandarin. And as I say, I think my historical interests lie in that part of the world, all very different from our own mindset of how we operate. Now, people ask me, what's the best place, your favourite place to go? Well, every place has its attractions. I wouldn't say that well, I suppose China in one sense. America I'm not so fond of because I don't think they have too much history there. But nevertheless, every place I've been to I have found interesting in all sorts of ways. But if I'm put on the spot, I think perhaps the most interesting and in fact scariest place is North Korea. And I went to North Korea about 10 years ago. You can only get into North Korea through either Vladivostok or China. And I took the train, the 24-hour journey from Beijing to Pyongyang. When I arrived at Pyongyang station, the loudspeakers were blaring out music and song. And during our stay in North Korea, we were very, very familiar with this song that we heard everywhere we went. In every North Korean town, they have battered VW camper vans with enormous loudspeakers on the top. And they're called motivator vans. And they go around the housing estates in the morning, blaring out this particular song to wake people up. It's a bit like the old knocker-uppers in Bolton streets tapping on your windows to get people up to go to the mills. And in the afternoon, if there's a suspicion that the factory workers are not working as hard as they should be, the motivator vans pile up outside the factories and blare the music in. Now, when you hear this in North Korea, you have to listen to this song with unfeigned enthusiasm. Your eyes are bright, you smile, you love this song. Because there are consequences if you don't. There is a case of a military parade where this particular song was being played. A 5-star army general nodded off. He was immediately hauled off the podium, and I'm afraid to say he was shot because he was showing disrespect. Because this song is called General Kim Jong-il, the head of state. Now, this is going to be my second song. You don't need to know Korean to understand exactly what this song is all about. It's typical revolutionary ardor and this sort of thing. And I've played this song lots and lots of times when I give little talks on North Korea. And in case you have nodded off a bit, I think you should listen to this song, General Kim Jong-il, and I want to see that enthusiasm. Don't need to sing it, but you've got to look alert and enthusiastic. So, can we have song 2, please? Well, the translation is obvious that it's General Kim Jong-il is leading his people to glorious victories, and thanks to our wonderful general, North Korea is going to conquer the world. I mean, that's what it says. And you can understand that the whole tenor of that music gets you into that sort of mode of thinking. Right, well, what I haven't mentioned thus far is any idea of faith, and this is one of the parts of FFF that perhaps I need to mention. So I'm going to sort of finish off with something about sort of faith and spiritual journeys. Now, my last object is this icon. Now, the style is Russian and medieval. It's got gold leaf here. It's a proper icon. It's been blessed. You could venerate it. You can say your intercessionary prayers to it, and it would be wholly appropriate for this to be in a church. Russian icons get a lot of cost a lot of money, 4-figure sums. If it had the signature Andrei Rublev in the bottom corner, it would be worth $250,000. He's the most famous Russian icon painter from the reign of Ivan the Terrible at the time of the Mongol invasions. If I took this to the Antiques Roadshow, of course, and said, look, I've got a Russian icon here, give me its value, I would be politely told that, sorry, it's not genuine, it's a fake, it's a forgery, because it's not Russian at all. It's one that I have painted when I went on an icon painting course in the Lakes about 5 years ago. It took me a week to paint, and that's pretty quick for painting icons. Icon painting is sometimes known as praying the icon. It is a spiritual exercise in the sense that what you're doing is glorifying God. You're doing your very best to show the glory of God through art. And as you paint, we will listen to Orthodox Russian liturgical music, and we meditated, and it was a slow and gentle process. Now, I've seen a lot of icons in my time, mostly in Eastern Europe, and whatever you say about Mr. Putin, what he has done is to order lots of churches that Stalin had destroyed to be rebuilt and redecorated and refurbished. But there is another place where I have come across icons, and that is Walsingham. Walsingham, the shrine, the Catholic and Anglican shrine at Walsingham, 20 miles away from Cromer, another Norfolk reference there. It also contains 2 Orthodox churches, Russian Orthodox churches, which are full of icons. And I have been to Orthodox services. Very, very powerful singing. Very difficult to follow because, well, part of it's in Russian, but part of it is in English. They tend to repeat, and they don't sort of tell you in the missal what you're doing, but a really good experience. Now, I'm not Russian Orthodox by religion for a number of reasons. One, clearly the Russian Orthodox Church is absolutely behind Putin in his activities in the Ukraine. They are right behind him. He's doing God's work, in inverted commas. Secondly, of course, where do you find a Russian Orthodox church? There are in Manchester, and of course there are practical issues there. But perhaps the main reason is that the theology of Orthodox Christianity puts an incredible emphasis on original sin. Humanity has no salvation except from faith and appealing to God for mercy. Mankind, humanity, is woefully sinful. Well, I'm not always a very nice person, but I don't think I wallow in sin day in, day out and wake up in the morning saying, I'm going to be sinful today. And I sort of rather pull back from that. So, my spiritual journey is quite eclectic. During lockdown, as we all did, I spent the time rummaging through papers and tidying up, and I came across the proverbial shoebox. And in that proverbial shoebox, I found a little envelope. In that little envelope, I found a copy of my baptismal certificate from Gerrard's Cross Methodist Church in London. Now, I never knew of this document. My parents didn't tell me that I'd been baptised a Methodist. My family on both sides, my grandparents were stalwart Methodists with strong teetotal additions, but my parents didn't go to chapel, and the issue didn't come up, so it was a surprise. At school, we sang in assemblies from hymns, ancient and modern, the Anglican hymn book. And as I say, university and beyond, I did reject the religious element as an explanation for human motivation and followed that sort of neo-Marxist line. But it wasn't until my mum died and I sort of asked the question, well, yes, what are we here for? Do we just have an existence, die, and everything's forgotten? And I started asking, those sort of big questions about life, the universe, and whatever. Now, in my family, my father's generation, there were some Quaker elements. My dad was a conscientious objector during the Second World War, but he did go to the liberation of Belsen, where he, as an engineer, part of his duties were to blow up the crematorium, but he never talked about that. And I found myself drawn towards the Religious Society of Friends, largely because, as a historian, again, the mid-17th century, the decades from 1640 to 1660, was an incredibly tumultuous period in English history. The king had been executed. England was a republic. Left-wing radical Puritans were on the up. The turkey patrols on Christmas Day hauled turkeys out of the ovens because Christmas Day was deemed as a sort of pagan festival and this sort of thing. And I came across the writings of George Fox, the Quaker who tramped around this part of the world, hurling abuse at Anglican vicars and this sort of thing. And his journal, spoke to my condition. And yes, there are good things about Quakerism. They certainly wouldn't be writing a book on leadership and management because they have a different way of decision making. But gradually I found that there was something missing there, and what was missing were the sacraments. Some sacramental celebration I felt was lacking, and again with the icons, the beauty of holiness attracted me, whereas Quakers believe in plainness. And it was this sort of aesthetic, sacramental side of things that drew me elsewhere. And by a bit of serendipity, God does move in mysterious ways his wonders to perform. A little flyer came through my door some time ago, advertising a course in understanding the basic tenets of the Catholic Church, and this was based down at St. Joseph's in Halliwell. I went along and I found that this was a comfortable place to be. And so my spiritual journey sort of moved in that direction. Whether it moves anywhere else, who knows? Spiritual journeys, we don't know what the end result will be until we reach the end. But certainly the icon, and I also came across icons on a holiday in Ethiopia, where we visited Christian monasteries, usually where you had to scramble up rock faces and up ropes to get to them. And I found the atmosphere in those contexts was, again, very moving, very spiritual, and that appealed to me. Now, preparing this talk is a little bit, or talking through all these objects, is a little bit like unscrewing those Russian dolls, where you get smaller and smaller and smaller till you get to the essence. Now, what I've done this evening is to unlock some of those dolls, but let me assure you, or perhaps frighten you, that there's a lot more still to uncover. This is only sort of on the surface, but I hope that it's given you, some insight, something to think around. I was very conscious that, yes, I could have spent the whole evening talking about life in North Korea or my holiday experiences, but that would have been a distortion there. So I will finish now, slightly before 8 o'clock. I'm quite good at sticking to times. And because I had a Chinese poetry class this morning, perhaps I'm still a little bit in Chinese mode, so I'll finish by saying Xi Xi, Zhai Dan, thank you, and good night.
Well, we've certainly had a fascinating journey in the last 3/4 of an hour, or just short of 3/4 of an hour. Well done, good timekeeping. Must be something you've learnt on all your journeyings, be at the right place at the right time. But it's been fascinating to hear what you've had to say to us from your journeyings and from your teaching and so on. It's been most interesting, and I think it's really been good to see how you developed in your spirituality and in your faith at that point. I'm ever so pleased he was baptized a Methodist. I didn't know that. And I have to say, I'm sorry to the St. Cuthbert's people to say this, but if you do the next journey, if you move on, you want to come back to Methodism, you'll be welcome. Because we do have some of the elements that you enjoy, apparently, within our worship and our faith. I think we have a lot to learn from the things that Nick has said to us, about praying for leaders. Leaders are always important, and certainly those below them. But I think we need at this time to be most prayerful about leadership throughout the world. And for those who are getting it wrong, for those who are getting it right, and the thinking of the Orthodox Church, Russian Orthodox Church, and their support of Putin's actions, what can you say? Something is wrong, so we do need to pray and keep praying for leaders and those below them. And I think also, I was most impressed when you talked about a place where you felt the spirituality and it was important to you. I think it's important that we all do that, search for that spirituality, however it may manifest itself to us, and it does in various ways. But in the end, the icon reminds us that it's all really about glorifying God. Whatever title we give ourselves in terms of our various denominations, we're all here because we all worship and know the power of the same God and the power of the risen Lord Christ, Jesus Christ, whose special sacrifice we shall be celebrating, yes, in this next 10 days or so. So thank you very much, Nick, for a most enlightening talk. I mean, we've enjoyed every moment of it, and thank you very much for doing that.
They're asleep.
No, they're not asleep. They're fascinated by what you had to say, and I think that's really good. He must have been an excellent teacher, mustn't he, in his day? And obviously still is, if you know what I mean. So once again, thank you very much, Nick. If you'd like to give a round of applause, that would be great. And just to finish off the administration, so the organisation sort of thing, our next meeting will be on the 17th of April, when Dave Bagley from Urban Outreach will be presenting his life and faith in 5 objects and 2 songs. Just going back slightly to the second song, I shall never forget that, but not in the nicest possible way, if you know what I mean. It was a warning to us as much as anything. It's about praying for leaders, as I said earlier. So it will be Dave Bagley on the 17th. And I also wanted to say that, though we've not had the meeting that discusses these things, but we will be needing to think about our topics and our theme for next year. And it did strike me earlier that it might be a good idea to see if we can stretch this idea of life and faith in 5 objects and 2 songs to another year. So what do you think? Is it a possibility? Or are you fed up with it already? You're not fed up with it, I know. But anyway, I'll leave it with you. And what I would like to know is if you think that's a good idea, that we should repeat this theme idea in the next sessions, as it were. By then, we will have said goodbye, sadly, to our minister, the Reverend Hillary. But you can rest assured that our new minister won't get away with it. He'll certainly, if we go along that path, he will certainly be requested to speak to us. And I would imagine you'll be very interested to know about him and his life. However, that's by the way. If you have any suggestions about people who might be willing to take on this and we would learn from what they have to say, then please speak to somebody and tell us. If you have any ideas for going back to the old system of a theme for the series, then equally let me know. But until then, I want to say thank you for your attendance, for your attention, which I'm sure they weren't asleep, I assure you, Nick. And I wish you all good night, God bless, and a safe journey home.
Can I just say thank you for the tickling start there?
Yes, I forgot to. Yeah. They should have been on my list earlier, so I'd like to add to that now and say I'm really sorry for not putting you down, but I had thought about it. Okay, thank you very much.